Thanks so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Sparks flew at the first Republican presidential debate last night. All eyes were on the frontrunner, Donald Trump. And while he lived up to his no-nonsense style, he said something that may have hurt his chances. Over the next few days, the polls will show us who will rise and who will fall. CBN's David Brody was in Cleveland for the big showdown.
Going in, it was considered one of the most anticipated presidential debates ever. The reason? Donald Trump. And it didn't take long for fireworks, as each candidate was asked if they would pledge not to run as an independent if they didn't win the GOP nomination. Only Trump, the frontrunner, refused to commit.
You can't say tonight that you can make that pledge.
I cannot say.
Then Trump's night got worse when Megyn Kelly brought up some of his past remarks about women.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account
only Rosie O'Donnell.
And how will you answer the charge from Hillary Clinton, who is likely to be the Democratic nominee, that you are part of the war on women?
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct.
While Trump took some lumps, candidates like Governor Chris Christie and Senator Rand Paul went after one another. One exchange centered on the federal government's role in collecting private American records.
I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from innocent Americans.
That's a completely ridiculous answer. I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from other people. How are you supposed to know, Megyn?
Use the Fourth
What are you supposed
Amendment.
to? How are you supposed
Use
to?
the Fourth
no, I'll
Amendment.
tell you how you
get a warrant.
Let me tell you something.
Get a judge to sign
when
a warrant.
Senator.
Go ahead, wait, Governor Christie, make your point.
Listen, Senator, when you're sitting in a subcommittee just blowing hot air about this, you can say things like that.
Meanwhile, the candidates all tried to differentiate themselves. Brain surgeon Ben Carson explained his uniqueness among his peers.
The only one to take out half of a brain, although you would think if you go to Washington that someone had beat me to it. But
others, like top-tier candidate Jeb Bush, came to this debate with a lot to prove. While he stumbled recently, Bush answered forcefully on the sensitive subject of his brother's decision to go to war in Iraq.
It was a mistake. I wouldn't have gone in.
Candidates also got the opportunity to take on Democrat frontrunner Hillary Clinton.
If I'm our nominee, how is Hillary Clinton going to lecture me about living paycheck to paycheck? I was raised paycheck to paycheck.
The Russian and Chinese government know more about Hillary Clinton's email server than do the members of the United States Congress.
Social issues like abortion also came up, which played to Mike Huckabee's advantage.
The Supreme Court is not the supreme being, and we change the policy to be pro-life and protect children instead of rip up their body parts and sell them like they're parts to a Buick.
And God also made it into the list of questions when candidates were asked if they've received a word from him on what they should do and take care of first.
I am blessed to receive a word from God every day and receiving the scriptures and reading the scriptures, and God speaks through the Bible.
In the earlier debate between lower polling candidates, former Hewlett-Packard CEO Carly Fiorina received positive reviews, and she had no problem taking a swipe at the frontrunner Trump.
Since he has changed his mind on amnesty, on health care, and on abortion, I would just ask, what are the principles by which he will govern?
The next time all of these candidates will be together on the same stage will be next month in California at the Reagan Library. It's all part of a very long and winding road that actually comes back here to Cleveland next summer. That's where they'll hold the GOP convention, and that's where they'll choose a nominee for their one-on-one matchup. David Brody, CBN News in Cleveland, Ohio.
Thank you, David. Democratic support for the nuclear deal with Iran is dwindling. Top New York Senator Chuck Schumer now says he will oppose the agreement. And he is not the only Democrat coming out against the deal. Charlene Aaron has this story.
President Obama has been pushing hard for congressional approval for the U.S. nuclear deal with Iran. Republicans are united in their opposition of the deal, saying Iran can't be trusted and that the U.S. and its allies could have reached a better deal. But the president disagrees, and he defended the agreement in a major speech Wednesday, making headlines when he compared hardliners in Iran to Republicans who opposed the deal.
In fact, it's those hardliners who are most comfortable with the status quo. It's those hardliners chanting death to America who've been most opposed to the deal. They're making common cause with the Republican caucus.
But it's not just Republicans opposing the plan. Chuck Schumer, expected to be the next Democratic leader of the Senate, has become the first Democrat in the Senate to oppose the agreement, saying, "After deep study, careful thought, and considerable soul-searching, I have decided I must oppose the agreement and will vote yes on a motion of disapproval." He added, "In making my decision, I examined this deal in 3 parts. Nuclear restrictions on Iran in the first 10 years, nuclear restrictions on Iran after 10 years, and non-nuclear components and consequences of a deal. In each case, I have asked, are we better off with the agreement or without it?" Schumer's no vote hurts the president's efforts to win support of Senate Democrats, but other Democrats have also voiced concerns. Representative Eliot Engel of New York, the leading Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, has also come out against the deal, despite a one-on-one meeting with the president last week. Congress is set to vote on the deal next month. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Alabama's Governor Robert Bentley is defunding Planned Parenthood in his state. He is terminating the state's Medicaid contract with the company after controversial undercover videos showed Planned Parenthood administrators making deals to sell baby body parts. Bentley said, as a doctor and Alabama's governor, the issue of human life from conception to birth and beyond is extremely important to me. I respect human life, and I do not want Alabama to be associated with an organization that does not. Alabama follows Louisiana and New Hampshire in its steps to defund the abortion provider, even as federal efforts have stalled. North Carolina's largest health insurer says the high costs are forcing them to seek higher premium increases than expected. 2 months ago, Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina said it wanted to raise rates by an average of nearly 26% in January of 2016. But now it's seeking an average 35% higher premium for insurance sold under Obamacare. North Carolina is not the only state facing steep price increases. A study by the Kaiser Family Foundation says dozens of health insurers across the country are increasing premiums well beyond the 10% for next year. The Senate has finally issued its bipartisan report on the IRS targeting scandal, where the agency blocked Tea Party and other conservative groups by holding up their applications for tax-exempt status. The report found that the tax agency did indeed hold up those applications, causing trouble for the groups. Democrats say it was just bureaucratic bungling, but Republicans say the tax agency harassed the conservative groups on purpose and that the Obama administration misled Congress and tried to hide evidence. A county clerk in Kentucky who was sued for refusing to issue same-sex marriage licenses is now suing the governor. Rowan County Clerk Kim Davis says Governor Steve Beshear violated her religious freedom. That's because he ordered all clerks in the state to issue marriage licenses to all couples or resign. 4 couples sued Davis last month after she denied them licenses. Now she wants a federal judge to affirm her right to follow her Christian convictions about marriage. Want to turn overseas now. The Myanmar government says it needs help in flood relief and rehabilitation for more than 200,000 victims displaced by massive flooding and landslides. CBN humanitarian teams have responded and are reaching out to the isolated villages.
Villages have been cut off from water and food supply after Cyclone Comet lashed through Myanmar, followed by heavy monsoon rains. The massive flooding and landslides left more than 63 people dead and over 200,000 displaced. In the past, the military government refused international help, but the current quasi-civilian government is now appealing for assistance. Ujo Zin, deputy officer of Shrivo district, says the destruction to 500,000-acre rice field is the worst he's seen in this area.
This is really worse, and it has affected our farmers. The government will help them plant again. But at present, they need food supplies, and we are happy that you can help us.
CBN Humanitarian and Disaster Relief has partnered with the local government and churches to respond to the immediate needs of the flood victims.
Here are our volunteers from our church partners, and they are putting together some relief goods that are going to be distributed to the flood victims. So this bag has oil, sardines, salt, rice, and the most important of all, water.
Cooked meals have also been prepared to give for people stranded in Jiangshado. The village was isolated when flood waters washed away their only bridge. The CBN team transported much-needed supplies in small boats, braving strong currents just to bring relief to these isolated areas. Although the villagers had to walk through deep waters and thick mud, they were very happy to receive the much-needed help.
We are very grateful that you can come here in spite of the difficulty. We have food for our families that can last for the next several days. We hope you can come here again.
CBN teams are now working to identify more villages that lack food and water, bringing relief to flood victims who, in the midst of calamity, desperately need help and hope. Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Sagaing, Myanmar.
The one island of safety and tranquility and peace is Israel. Every other state, you see, is struggling in order to survive.
Coming up, an Israeli expert explains why the two-state solution is no solution at all. It's been nearly 5 years since the so-called Arab Spring. Protests swept across the Middle East. Many around the world expected democratic reform, but instead, the result was chaos. Our Scott Ross sat down with a Middle East expert to talk about what this means for Israel and its relationship with the United States.
Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and yet, for decades, has been blamed for much of the trouble in the region. Now, oddly enough, Israel has remained strong while surrounded by enemies and chaos.
So one island of safety and tranquility and peace is Israel. The only country that's a coherent nation state, an organic nation state in this region is the Jewish state. Every other state you see either collapsing or on the verge of collapse and struggling in order to survive.
Born in Chicago, Carolyn Glick immigrated to Israel at age 21, joined the IDF, became involved in politics, and at one time advised Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on foreign policy.
There's a misconception that this whole problem that we're seeing now exploding in our faces throughout these areas is somehow or another a function of the absence of a Palestinian state in the land of Israel.
Glick says that's not true. U.S. administrations have tried for decades to resolve the conflict by trying to force Israel to give up its biblical homeland in order to create a Palestinian state.
If you lay the blame for the absence of peace and stability in the Middle East on the Jewish state, then you have a way out. You don't have to confront any of the real difficulties that are inherent to the failed systems of governance that the Arabs have adopted for themselves over the past 100 years.
Glick says the real problem is that Israel's neighbors never accepted its existence.
Big picture. What's the grand theme in the Middle East these days?
The unraveling of the state system that was instituted here at the end of World War I by the British and the French.
Following World War I, the League of Nations carved up the Turkish Ottoman Empire. Over the years, those areas became states and gained independence, but were mostly ruled by kings or dictators.
All of these dynastic orders that were established by them to encompass states are being stressed, if not breaking. The whole concept of a balance of power between the Sunnis and the Shiites, all of this is going out the window.
Glick says the recent disintegration of regional regimes has led to power vacuums being filled by radical Islam.
You have spoilers coming in and taking advantage of the power vacuum, whether it's ISIS on the Sunni side or it's the Iranians on the Shiite side with Hezbollah as their strike force.
With them, all this infighting going on, isn't that an advantage for Israel?
Israel has to be much more wary. We have to be much more vigilant in protecting our borders, and I dare say we have to be much more vigilant in integrating our own Arab minority into our society for two reasons. One, because it's the right thing to do, and the second reason is because you see massive attempts by ISIS and other terrorist organizations, as well as the Iranian regime, to infiltrate and penetrate Israel's Arab population as well as the Palestinians for the purpose of them fomenting wars against us from inside.
What about the relationship between Israel and Iran?
I think Iran really is the principal danger. I mean, it's been argued that ISIS is far less dangerous than Iran because they're so brutal and they're so monstrous that they have far less ability to maintain themselves over time. On the other hand, Iran is a regime that has managed to survive the test of time since the revolution in 1979.
And now, some 35 years later, Iran has advanced weapon systems, is trying to go nuclear, and is using regional chaos to expand its empire. To make matters worse, U.S.-Israel relations are on rocky ground. The United States has always been an ally of Israel, support of Israel, but recently it seems there is a real stress on that relationship.
The Obama administration is changing sides, essentially, unfortunately, by siding with Iran against Israel, against the Sunnis. He has this idea, I assume, that he can rejigger the balance of power by removing the United States as the main influencer and controller of this region. But what we see is that that isn't true. There is no balance of power. What there is a nuclear arms race now ensuing because of America's nuclear policy towards Iran.
Despite the seeming Middle East meltdown, Glick says she has hope for the future.
There is strong support in the United States, different parts of the world, from the Christian world. How important is that?
It's critical because I think that, strategic wisdom can stem from many sources, and the Bible is one of those sources.
Are you hopeful for the future, or do you feel like you're a voice crying in the wilderness?
I'm hopeful for the future because, like you, I believe in God, and I have faith not only in the God of Israel, but also in the people of Israel.
Praying for the peace of Jerusalem, do you think prayer makes a difference?
Of course it makes a difference.
Yeah.
I hope it does anyway, because I find myself praying even when I'm not thinking about it. So I hope I'm not wasting all that energy, but I'm fairly certain that I'm not. Yeah. No, I think that prayer is extremely important.
Scott Ross, Jerusalem.
And you can hear more of Scott's conversation with Caroline Glick as they talk about Western civilization at a crossroads and how important Christian support is to Israel by going to CBNNews.com. Up next, we're bringing you family-friendly movie reviews to kick off your weekend. Well, the weekend is here, and you may be looking for a little family-friendly entertainment. Here now with our regular family-friendly movie review is Bob Walasewski. He's with Focus on the Family's entertainment review department called Plugged In Online. So, Bob, there's a new claymation movie called Shaun and the Sheep from the makers of Wallace and Gromit. Tell us about it.
Well, Shaun the Sheep decides he and his sheep buddies need a vacation, and but they have to sidetrack the farmer to make that happen. And how best can sheep sidetrack is do what they do best, and that's jump over fences and put the farmer to sleep. Unfortunately, as he sleeps in this trailer, it goes crashing down in the cliff, and they realize they have to save him as well. By the way, this film is a silent movie in essence because there's absolutely not a word of dialogue. There's sounds, but there's no dialogue. So it's not really silent, but it is in essence. Cute little movie. We gave it a 4 out of 5, as these often go. There is some toilet humor to navigate, but I think most families will find that rather easy with Shaun the Sheep.
All right, 4 out of 5, not bad. Meryl Streep's new movie, Ricky and the Flash, is coming out as well. What did you think of that one?
You know, Meryl Streep's character is Ricky, a middle-aged rocker, if you will. Now, not a rocker on a big stage, but she plays a regular gig at a small nightclub, and apparently for not very much money, because repeatedly we find out she has financial problems. We also find out she abandoned her family. She had 3 children when they were quite young. So now they're all adults, and she gets a call from her ex saying that the daughter, there's a girl and 2 boys, the daughter is in quite a depression because her husband left her for another woman. Would she consider coming from California to Indiana to spend some time, even though she abandoned, the ex thinks she can make a difference? And she does that very thing. Now, there are some good messages here. Although everyone in this film is dysfunctional to some degree, and by the end of the film, they're still dysfunctional to some degree. There's definitely some messages about forgiveness, about second chance, about it's never too late to try to be a better parent, even if you've made some unwise decisions. Unfortunately, one of my biggest hangups with this film was that there's 3 people smoking marijuana, making it look pretty cool, really. So the glamorization of pot in this film was a significant problem. Meryl Streep's moral choices, her live-in current boyfriend, and there's a scene with them two, not explicit, but it's like, a little bit of language. We ended up giving this one a 2.5 out of 5 for family friendliness. So despite some positivity, there just was a lot of content issues in Ricky and the Flash.
All right. Well, the other big film is The Fantastic Four, and I understand you've got a review of that one on your website, which is also out this weekend, so folks can check that out there as well. Bob, thank you.
You betcha.
And now we'd like to pass along an encouraging word. We call it your Friday Faithful. Have you ever been stunned by some news or someone's actions you simply did not expect? Perhaps someone you really depended on failed you, walked out, or just wasn't there when you really needed them. Just know this: your surprise or sudden disappointment never takes God by surprise. And if you really think about it, He's been quietly preparing you for it. He's now waiting to fill the void, repair the hurt, and ease the pain. And here's the good news: it is always better than what you had before. And that's going to do it now for CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to hear from you at Facebook or on Twitter. We'll see you back here on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend.